Hello, my name is Carey Johnson. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have been with Family Menders since 2016. I began my TBRI journey in 2018, become a full practitioner in September of 2023. Today, I will be doing an overview of trust-based relational intervention, referred to as TBRI, and I'm just beyond excited to present this presentation to you. I feel like everyone can utilize it any capacity that they communicate with anyone, honestly. We will jump right in. So today you will learn what TBRI is, how trauma affects the brain, and we'll specifically go over the hand-brain model and the 5 Bs of TBRI, the 3 TBRI principles, the first one being the connecting principles, which focuses on the value of relationships to promote healing, mindfulness of self, and mindfulness of others. Then the empowering principles, which focuses on the value of hydration, maintaining optimal glucose levels and sensory processing, as well as the importance of routine in helping children prepare for transitions. And lastly, we'll go over the correcting principles, which focuses on appropriate discipline versus punishment and the value of sharing power and the importance of balancing structure and nature. And we will also go over how to use the TBRI principles within each principle, and we get tools, handouts, and resources to utilize. What is TBRI? It is an evidence-based practice that meets the needs of the whole child. Now, this intervention was designed to meet the needs of vulnerable children or children who come from hard places and have experienced trauma. And so this first video puts all the basic principles of TBRI together to explain the need and reason for this intervention.
TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, has at its core building a trusting relationship. It has 3 sets of principles, and they look at the child as a whole. When you think about development, the baby cries and I say, yes, I will comfort you. And so this child learns that they have a voice. They learn trust, which is the lesson of the first year of life. I can trust. There are so many children from hard places, and for those children, their capacity to trust has been fiercely damaged. The brain chemistry of a child who cries and no one comes is dramatically altered. The child with a history of trauma or loss or abuse has no hope of healing without a nurturing relationship. In every way that I make time and space, that I give touch, eye contact, and I give words, I am going to empower this child to go back to the beginning of what he or she should have experienced in the arms of a loving parent that said, when you cry, I will come. The phenomenal thing about a trust-based intervention is, as we connect to this child, as we build safety, we actually change the brain chemistry. We change the wiring of the brain. This is really the heart and soul of all that we are and all that we do. Do I look into the child's eyes? Do I touch their arm when I talk to them? When they talk to me, do I stop what I'm doing and talk to them? This is the essence of mindfulness. The excitatory chemicals about I'm afraid, I'm hungry, I'm cold, those are balanced when the caregiver comes and gives warmth. All regulation occurs first with an external regulator. So in the beginning, I regulate all. They're cold, I bring warmth. They're crying, I bring myself. And out of my regulation, their brain develops capacity for self-regulation. If this child didn't have this experience, that child doesn't feel safe. This chemistry can be altered, first by knowing they're safe, second by nutrient-rich foods, third by my environmental regulation of that child's emotion, and fourth by appropriate exercise. So we can balance brain chemistry by creating a holistic environment. We clearly have to deal with behavior. Correcting means showing a child the right behavior, praising him when he gets it, and showing it to him until he can get it right, and showing him with no fear and no shame, so that he builds success, not a greater sense of failure. So the message of hope for our families is that we can help our children to dramatic levels of healing. We simply have to be devoted to it and be willing to invest what it's going to take.
I hope you found that video very informative. I love the little anime that Caring Purpose Institute has developed. I feel like they're brings everything together. Who uses TBRI? Principles of TBRI have been used in homes, schools, residential facilities, orphanages, within the court system, detention facilities, child welfare, therapeutic interventions, really anywhere where you can imagine that there's going to be any interaction with a child who has experienced any type of trauma. When I did the practitioner training, there were people from Georgia from all areas, judges, group homes, providers, residential providers, foster care workers, school social workers, churches, anybody and everybody. They are really trying to make this, like I said, a holistic approach so that anybody who has any sort of interaction with children can utilize the TBRI. Okay, so the second video, it is also very, very good, but it is an hour and 15 minutes. So we will not watch it for this presentation, but I wanted to put this link in here so that you could view it later if you have time. It is a really great video, and I highly encourage you to watch it. Well, TBRI is an attachment-based trauma-informed intervention, so it's important to understand how the first year of life can have a profound impact on a child, especially how they do relationships. So research indicates that how one is shown attachment in the first 12 months of their life is the attachment style that they will have as adults. We also are aware that these attachment styles can change with different types of intervention and education, but ideally, what you're exposed to the first 12 months of life is what you're likely the attachment style that you're going to have as an adult. So just kind of want to draw your attention here. So as you saw in the video, when an infant is distressed, right here, and they express that they have a need, usually sometimes by crying. If it's an infant, they're wet, they're hungry, they just want to be held. Then a loving caregiver comes and responds and provides comfort. This repetition of, the baby is in distress, the needs are met, they're comforted. This repetition here teaches the infant that they are safe, they have a voice. Obviously, if they cry, that somebody's going to come, so they can trust others to meet their needs. It also gives the child feelings of self-worth because through this repetition, they realize that they are seen and valued. This helps develop the capacity to one day self-regulate on their own. So over here, I just want to draw your attention to when the needs are not met for an infant. So they express the needs, nothing is happening, they are not met, nobody comes to meet the need. These children live in chronic distress. They do not learn the capacity to self-regulate. And these are the kids that you see that can just, be triggered by the smallest thing. They couldn't get a candy bar in a store, even they throw this huge tantrum. They're not trying to be bad. It's that they just did not learn the skill when they were younger to self-regulate, and simply just don't have the capacity to self-regulate. They still have to be taught how to self-regulate by caring adults. TBRI identifies 6 early risk factors that influence the way children from difficult backgrounds think, trust, and connect with others. Could be just a difficult pregnancy. Now, this could be medically related, or maybe the mother used drugs or alcohol while pregnant, or it could be any other type of trauma while the mom is pregnant. Maybe they were in a car accident, any sort of trauma. But it could also be good stress. Maybe they have stress because they are just pregnant and they're excited and, getting the room ready, all the good stress. So how, any sort of high levels of stress throughout the pregnancy, the baby feels it the same way, whether it's good stress or bad stress. It affects the baby the exact same way. It could be a difficult birth. Maybe there's a traumatic birth or some sort of trauma happened at birth. Could be many reasons. Maybe the baby was out without oxygen for a brief amount of time. Maybe there was something wrong with the umbilical cord. There could be a lot of things that happen that could go under the category of difficult birth. Early hospitalization. So children who experience early hospitalization often experience painful touch rather than nurturing, comforting touch in the first days of their life. You're thinking of those that might have to go to the NICU, might have some sort of surgery. They're getting the painful touch of, maybe needles or medical procedures or whatever is needed. Obviously, it's needed to save their life, but that baby's first sense of touch is a painful touch, as opposed to if there were no issues, usually it's a comforting, loving touch. Now, obviously, we've come a long way with understanding the need for care and attachment, because now usually when the baby is born, the baby is immediately given to the mom to get that kind of like skin-on-skin care, or they call sometimes kangaroo care. So, they've really learned that is extremely important to have that healthy touch, that good touch, as soon as the baby is born, the very, first few minutes and days of their life. Abuse. So children from abusive backgrounds know to always be on guard. Their brains have been trained to be hypervigilant to their environment. Neglect. The message sent to the child from a neglectful background is, you don't really matter. Children from neglectful backgrounds often suffer from the most severe behavioral problems and developmental deficits. And trauma. Any number of trauma in a child's life can cause the child's developmental trajectory to change. Any sort of trauma, maybe they were in a car accident, maybe there was some sort of natural disaster, maybe they were separated from their family for whatever reason, just any sort of traumatic event. There are 5 major stages of brain development in childhood, in addition to the age of 5, which is when most children enter school. So that is a pretty significant brain developmental stage. But there are, like I said, 5 other major stages. And at each stage, there's an increase in the child's behaviors, has been noted, as well as an increase in the need for support. Now, Dan Siegel worked very closely with Karen Purvis at the Karen Purvis Institute to develop TBRI. And he came up with a hand-brain model to teach us how the brain works, kind of regarding thinking, feelings, and behaviors. But I also found this video that really kind of summarizes how the brain works. And I think this would be great for you to be able to show anybody that you work with, that they can kind of help understand it too.
Ever felt a big reaction to something and not known why? Here's a way to help you understand your brain and manage your behaviour. The hand model of the brain. The bottom of your hand represents the brainstem and is involved with the automatic physical processes that keep us alive, like breathing and our heart rate. Your thumb is your limbic system, and with your brainstem forms part of your emotional brain. This helps you to manage and understand your feelings and stress responses. The outside of your hand and fingers are your cortex, or your thinking brain. When the thinking and emotional brain work together, it's easier to manage your emotions, talk with others, and problem solve. But if you feel surprised, unsafe, or scared, your emotional brain takes immediate action. It can act much faster without working with your thinking brain, so you flip your lid. If you're in real danger, acting fast can help keep you safe, and that's really important. And then when the danger has passed, your lid comes back on. Your thinking brain is back in control. But sometimes we flip our lids when we don't need to. How we think and behave isn't helpful. You can practice putting your lid back on by breathing slowly or by spending time with someone you trust. This tells your emotional brain you are safe, and it can work with your thinking brain again. Now your whole brain can help you manage your behaviour and your feelings.
Yeah, I just really felt that video just was so very informative, and I thought it was a great video that we could show even kids or adults and just kind of give them a little understanding of what's going on. So from this model, I just want to kind of see that you can see right here, that they refer to it as, the thinking brain, also refer to it as the upstairs brain. That's, responsible for the thinking. And while your downstairs brain or your emotional brain is responsible for feelings. So if one has flipped their lid, their downstairs brain is in control. Basically, their upstairs brain is offline. So for children who've experienced trauma, their brains are operating at a level of survival. So their primary concern is getting their needs met any way possible. So they are in their emotional brain most of the time, if not all of the time. So it's very hard to use their thinking brain because they live in their emotional brain. The TBRI is all about helping people understand the why so we can respond with deeper compassion. So knowing that adverse childhood experiences or ACEs can lead to toxic stress helps us better understand what may be happening on the inside, which is why it's important to understand how the brain works, which is why I wanted to utilize the hand brain model. But from this infographic, you can see what goes on in the brain of a child who's experienced chronic stress. Remember those who, were distressed, expressing they needed a need and nothing was ever met. For those kids, there's an increase in difficulty in making friends and maintaining relationships, lowers the tolerance for stress, which can result in behaviors such as fighting, checking out, or defiance, increases stress hormones, which affect the body's ability to fight infection, may cause lasting health problems, increases problems with learning and memory, reduces the ability to respond, learn, or figure things out, which can result in problems in school. But also just kind of want to draw your attention to this little bubble where it says, I can't hear you, I can't respond to you, I'm just trying to be safe. Because that just really shows that they are in their downstairs brain, so their thinking brain is offline. They really can't hear you. They can't hear what you're saying. They can't comprehend what you're saying and, utilize anything that you're trying to tell them to do when they're in their downstairs brain. What you see here on the left is a PET scan of a healthy brain, and on the right is one that has experienced abuse in infancy. Because of the reduced brain activity in the temporal lobes, which is the one obviously that are circled here, this child will suffer emotional and cognitive problems without supportive intervention. So I just want to draw your attention to the bottom of the photo, which is the downstairs brain and the emotional brain. If you will see that the child who's experienced abuse has more activity here, as you can see, there's more red, there's more activity here. And so this is just a great way to show that a child who has experienced trauma does not have the capacity to self-regulate yet. So remember, the brain is like plastic. So as it changes in response to what happens to it, which means it can adapt to new situations. So that's where, if we remember the video at the very beginning, your brain chemistry can change over time, depending on what kind of interactions it is exposed to. When there are disruptions in the attachment cycle and a child has experienced trauma, they have not developed the skill set to self-regulate. Basically, they don't know how to calm themselves by themselves. So what we see here basically is the chronicle age of a kid who is 14, but he is more developmentally like a child half their age, so more like a 7, 8-year-old, maybe even 6. These kids, although they're 14, they're going to display behaviors that you were probably going to see more out of a 6 or 7-year-old because the child didn't learn how to use their voice to get their needs met. They move to maladaptive strategies, manipulation, lying, stealing to get what they want. So what you see is that these 14-year-olds now have the street smarts or survival skills of someone twice their age. So while these negative strategies may be necessary now or may not be necessary now because they are in a safe space, these children don't necessarily feel safe, and they have been taught through repetition, remember the repeated cycle, that they have to use these maladaptive strategies to get what they need because their body and their brain has learned that nobody is going to meet their need except for them, and they're going to meet their need however they can, whether it's stealing, lying, aggression, whatever the case may be. A lot of times we get people and they're like, well, if they're smart enough to manipulate to get what they want, or they're smart enough to know to steal and try to get away with it and have that thought process to think it through, they should be, smart enough to know right from wrong, or smart enough to know that to put the dishes in the dishwasher, or to take the trash out, whatever the situation is, because I think if they have this level of street smarts, they show that level of smarts on any other level, or that they're capable of having it, when really they're not. Their brains were not trained that way. Their brains were trained to be in survival mode at all times. So they're not having that rational thinking. They don't have that part of their brain activated. The 5 B's of TBRI. Developmental trauma produces widespread changes in our brain, body, biology, beliefs, and behavior. Now, while I like this little picture because it shows you that behaviors are just the tip of the iceberg, however, we tend to mostly focus on the behavior. But the behavior is just providing clues to the history of the child, the pain they experienced, fear, the needs that they have or had that were never met, and they had to meet themselves. Instead of focusing solely on the behavior, we need to let the behavior point us to the needs below the surface. Just want to touch a little on these. So the brain, we know from the earlier slides and the videos that trauma impacts the brain. It causes a person to have a more developed survival brain, or downstairs brain, which is responsible for keeping us safe through our fight, flight, freeze response. So while this becomes overdeveloped, the upstairs brain becomes underdeveloped because it's so preoccupied with surviving, it hasn't been able to develop. Remember the attachment cycle. When an infant cries and no one comes to meet their need, they are stuck in distress with basically cortisol flooding their system. They don't get the relief from an attentive caregiver meeting their need and, helping calm them down. So this can cause several issues, such as immune issues, immune system suppression, which means, the kids that are chronically sick, there's a lot of kids that we work with, that often are sick, always get strep, always get flu, with the cold or whatever's going around, they're usually going to get it. And the one's insulin receptors and metabolism are impacted. So it makes it extra important to address like nutrition and hydration. The body, which is the sensory systems, especially the internal senses that help us with body perception, such as where we are in space. The belief system. So what are some of the beliefs that you see in children or adults from traumatic backgrounds? They believe that they can't trust people, they have no voice, they have no control over their life, no value, it's all their fault. They are bad. They're always going to be bad. They have to look out for themselves because nobody's going to look out for them. No one loves them. They have to be the boss because nobody was ever the boss of them. So in TBRI, changed behavior is the result, but it's not the goal. When we focus on helping repair all of the B's, the behaviors will change. So the mind shift to being trauma responsive. This is where we're trying to basically change the belief or the thought of, the caregiver, the adults, whoever interacts with that child, from believing that however they're acting is just being willful disobedient, instead of seeing it as a survival strategy. So you have the ones, when you have the willful disobedience thought as a caregiver and adult, it's, what's wrong with you? Why can't you do this right? Why do you always mess this up? We went over this 100 times. Why can't you just do it correctly the first time? What's wrong with you? As opposed to when you shift it to the trauma responsive and the survival strategy thought, whereas, what happened to you? Obviously he or she can't do whatever it is, but it's not just because they're being willfully disobedient and just don't want to do it, or being defiant. It's they really have not developed the capacity to do whatever it is. So instead of being like, why can't you do this right? Why can't you fix this? Or, if the kid's late every morning getting ready for school, why can't you get up on time? Why can't you maybe shift to being like, okay, so obviously what we're doing, this system that we have in place isn't working. So let's figure out what maybe we can do differently that will work. Let's try something different. Let's think about some things that we can try different. Do you need to get up earlier? Do we need to do more stuff the night before to prepare for the next morning? What are some things that we can do to make it better instead of just continuously making that child feel like they're bad? Now, when children feel safe in their environment, they feel secure enough to explore, learn, try new things, play, and connect with others. Even though the child is now in a safe home or environment, away from the abuse, the trauma, or whatever the negative situation was, the child may not feel safe. Physically, they are safe, but emotionally, they're still in their emotional brain. They don't feel safe. It could have taken however long to get that child to a safe place, weeks, months, years, however long. So just having that child in a safe place for a short amount of time is not going to change their brain chemistry to make them feel safe when it could have taken years of their survival brain being developed and overdeveloped. So just, having a short amount of time is not going to even out the development in their brain. So now we're going to go into the TBRI principles. So the first one is the connecting principle, which is basically designed to help build trust by deep connection between the child and adult. And we'll go over mindfulness strategies and engagement strategies. The empowering principles helps children learn self skills like self-regulation. So we'll do that with the physiological strategies, which is their internal needs, and ecological strategies, which is their external needs. And the correcting principles, which are proactive strategies and responsive strategies. Now, the correcting is the last principle. People who focus on just the behavior and not everything else, they usually want to correct first instead of trying to connect with the child. Correcting principle, it is designed to help build social and behavioral competence so the child's more successful in navigating the social world. So we'll dive into the connecting principles. The connecting principles are the heart and soul of TBRI as they help children build trust in meaningful relationships. Healthy attachment involves both the caregiver and the child. The mindfulness strategies are designed to help caregivers become aware of their personal thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors that they bring to interactions with children in their care and how they influence the relationship. A caregiver's own attachment history or anybody who's working with that child could be, a teacher, a therapist, a provider, somebody transporting that child, supervising the visits in any way capacity, that you're having any sort of interaction with that child, your own attachment history influences, the care that you give to a child. So for most people, like I said, the attachment style at 12 months of age is the one that you're going to carry throughout your life. So someone who grows up secure in his or her attachment is able to give loving, caring response and be consistent, while someone who grows up insecure in their attachment may not have the same capacity for consistent responsiveness to a child for many reasons. So a caregiver's understanding of their own history, but how it influences their behavior and how they interpret the behavior of others is part of being mindfully aware. So, this is taken into consideration if you have some sort of trigger. Maybe it's the kid doing something simple like rolling their eyes. I'm not excusing the behavior or justifying it, but maybe, your reaction to it is extreme when it really doesn't need to be extreme for what is kind of considered a small behavior. So, maybe look into yourself and be like, why is this such a big deal for me? Like what, maybe it was, so however your parents or caregivers dealt with that when you were a kid, you just never know. There could be something going on to why you're, maybe overreacting or being a little less understanding than probably you should. So being mindfully aware, that just means, like I said, act with awareness, be aware of what's going on, be less reactive. You have to be able to come back to, a place of emotional stability. You have to be the one who is the stable adult. Be non-judgmental. Again, not why can't you do this right? Why are you always doing this wrong? What is wrong with you? More of, okay, what can we do to make this situation better? encode it. That basically means you need to figure out the words to be able to, figure out what's going on, or to identify and say what's going on, define what's going on. Maybe the kid doesn't have the capacity to do so. So this is more of like really looking in to see what's going on. Why are they, stealing whatever? What's really going on? And, be self-observant. Observe yourself and how you are responding to situations, whether you're being over responsive, under responsive, what the situation is. This is very hard for some adults, because a lot of adults want to see that it's just the child's behavior that's the problem. It's the child that's the problem. It's whoever did whatever to the child, whatever the case may be, or whatever happened, it's not their problem. I'm not doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with my parenting. This is how I was raised and I'm fine. And that might be all well and good, but this child had a very different experience than probably what you had when you were a child, or that person had when they were a child, which is why their interactions and relationships with others and behaviors are wildly different. There's just a lot of having to be very mindful, and this is very, very hard. Like I said, for a lot of caregivers, and a lot of times caregivers need to look a little more inward and do a little more work on themselves to learn what's going on, and not just see it as it's just the child, or I'll just take this parenting class and it'll be fine, without really trying to understand what's going on with their reactions and their interactions with other people. If you have been at Family Mentors for a while, we have done many, many seminars and trainings and provided many resources on self-care. And that also goes hand in hand with mindfulness, being able to take the time out that you need to be mindful of others, not get overwhelmed, not, just be so exhausted all the time from being a parent or being a caregiver or working with children or working in this capacity, and all the other responsibilities that comes along with. Self-care is extremely important. And I hope that if you have done those trainings, you've taken something from it and that you're practicing self-care. If you are not, please, please reach out for any sort of guidance and resources on how to do so. For the connecting principles, the engagement strategies are the second part, and they teach how to connect with children through nonverbal interaction. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware that when I'm saying caregiver, this could be anybody who has any interaction with these children. The engagement strategies are designed to help caregivers better understand how to relate to the relationship from a child's point of view. So they involve specific techniques that make it easier to relate to children in the ways they communicate best, non-verbally and through playful interaction. So we have here, you can see the healthy touch. I know for a lot of providers, including family members, we have a hands-off policy, for various reasons. But, that doesn't mean if a child comes running up to you to give you a hug, you immediately say, no, get away. That's not going to help their connection. They're like, oh, hey, listen, unfortunately we can't do that, but hey, let's figure out something else we can do. Maybe a secret handshake, maybe high fives, a symbolic handshake, whatever the case may be. There's other things that you can do, just like little chin prompt, things of that nature. That doesn't mean, like I said, solely hands off and completely be like, nope, get away. There's other things that you can do to kind of have that healthy touch, symbolic touch connection. Eye contact. Eye contact changes the brain chemistry. We all know that if somebody's giving you eye contact, you think they're paying attention, as opposed to when someone is not. So you want to get eye contact from a child when you can, but never force it. There are some kids, maybe they're on the autism spectrum. They have difficulty looking you in the eye, or maybe they just have difficulty looking you in the eye for other reasons. Maybe it makes them scared, who knows what the case may be. So never force a child to look you in the eye, but remember as the adult to always use kind, gentle eyes to communicate to your child that they are precious, even if the child may not be having precious behaviors at the time. You as the adult still need to let them know that they're still loved and important. let them know with, your kind eyes that you still love them and they can make mistakes and we can learn from it. But you definitely need to make sure that you are aware of how you're looking at kids. My kids will tell me sometimes I give them the mom eyes, which, means either they're doing something that I don't approve of or that's going to get them in trouble. Sometimes have to be a little mindful of that. Voice quality. I, for one, am a loud person and I have to be mindful of that, especially when I am working with some kids who that might trigger them or that might, really throw them in some sort of whirlwind that they can't get out of because they're used to people being loud all the time and yelling, and that's just too much for them. So, really have to be mindful of your tone, your volume, your cadence, how you say things when you're saying things. There's ways that you can say things that come across as mean and derogatory, but you can say the same thing in a completely different tone and it come off nice and understanding. So you just be very mindful of how you're speaking. Okay, behavior matching. This can be anything, sitting the same way as a kid or a teenager. I think a lot of times they have the thought, and some professionals have the thought, they need to be in a position to show that they are a professional. You may be sitting behind a desk or sitting very professional, not, having any sort of leadway or anything of that nature to let them know that you can just be relaxed and get down on their level, whether that's getting down on the floor and, you know, sitting just like they are right beside them, just talking about things, going for a walk, whatever it is. You don't have to, have this like division between you guys for them to know that, you're an adult. I mean, it could even with your little kids, it could be something as choosing the same color, saying you have the same book, you love the same things, whatever it is. Like just, don't be afraid to get down on their level. And playful interaction. I know this is hard for some people because I have heard more than once. Well, my parents didn't play with me when I was little. I had to figure it out on my own or, play with my friends or play outside. My parents never played with me and I'm fine. Again, your childhood is very different from what they experienced. Think back to when you were a baby. Well, you probably don't remember in the first, 12 months of your life, but your parents probably did get down on the floor, play with you, show you colors, teach you colors, letters, alphabet, play with the little toys with you, all those kinds of things. You probably had that, which helped you learn the capacity, once again, to self-regulate and do things on your own. These kids did not have that, and they need it. So again, if it's you crawling around on the floor, acting like lions and tigers and bears, then crawl out on the floor and act like lions and tigers and bears. We've got to get back to understanding that these kids did not get that and they need it, as opposed to just, well, they can just figure it out on their own, or they have friends, or they can go outside. They might have friends and they might can go outside, but they also need the playful interaction from an adult. You don't have to do all these at once. You can't say, oh, too loud, and now all of it's gone. Or, maybe I said the wrong thing, or maybe I gave them the mean mom eyes, once or whatever. You don't have to do them all at once. Maybe start with just one thing and try to gradually introduce the others. Just keep trying. The empowering principles. So the empowering principles will provide you with many tools to help children feel safe, starting with simple things like making sure they stay hydrated to eating nutritious foods. But remember, because their biology was significantly altered by their beginning, children who come from hard places are physically more fragile. Like I said, they're designed to facilitate change in children by supporting their physical needs and teaching them self-regulation skills, also meeting their internal and external needs, which these strategies help children learn to self-regulate their behavior and emotions. I want to kind of look at senses and the sensory processing of the body. The external senses, which are sight, smell, touch, taste, and hearing, serve 4 primary functions for your body. It is to alert the body and brain, protect the body and brain from becoming overwhelmed, select what is important to pay attention to, and organize the brain automatically. The internal senses help the brain understand sensory input. So the vestibular sense is controlled by the fluid in the inner ear, and it tells the body where it is in relation to earth. It helps the body balance. If the vestibular sense is off, so is everything else. Think of, if you ever think of children or maybe even adults when you have ear infections, you feel off balance. I know a lot of times when kids have ear infections, they're wobbly, and that's why their whole body is off balance. Or if you think of if you have ever experienced vertigo, that's another thing. You're off balance, and when you're all you can't really do anything. It's hard to stand up. It's hard to walk. It's hard to move. It's hard to really do anything. So that's why it's important to know if that sense is off, everything is off. Your proprioceptive sense registers the amount of pressure when the body is being touched. So we know from science that firm, gentle muscle pressure is calming and organizing for the brain and body. Obviously, we're hands off. We don't want to be giving massages to children, but think of teaching their caregiver, their parent, whoever it may be, maybe some pressure points or things that they can do to help, give them that pressure that their body needs to kind of reset itself. The vestibular sense has connections all over the brain, which is why when it's off, everything is off. The tactile sense, that is the first sense to develop in utero, and it is fully functioning at birth. So touch is the way infants connect with others from the very beginning of life, which is why we went over that. Sometimes if you have a difficult birth or early hospitalization, that is why the touch is very, very important, because when you have maybe a harmful touch, how that affects the brain versus when you have the nice, comforting, soothing touches at the beginning of life. Soothing touch often calms fussy babies, and even very, very young infants can distinguish the touch of their mothers from the touch of others. So that's why it's just very important for, babies to have that nice, loving, comforting, soothing touch. The physiological strategies or internal strategies for sensory processing. It is common for children who've experienced trauma to have deficits in their sensory processing capacities. Sensory processing disorder is defined as the failure of one or more of the senses to develop appropriately, causing a person to have confused sensory interactions with the environment. So when children from hard places feel overwhelmed or out of control, their brains move to a primitive response system, which is the downstairs brain, with few options, basically fight, flight, or freeze. So in situations where sensory input is involved, children react this way when they get too much input. Maybe they're overstimulated, or not enough input. Maybe they're understimulated. You want to think of the children that might have issues with going into anywhere that's really loud. Maybe the lunchroom is too loud for them. Maybe anything they might be having at school, like in an auditorium or something where they're having speakers and the whole school is in there. That might be too much. That just might be too much going on for them. They're way overstimulated. Whatever the sense is that's overstimulated is affecting their whole body. Or maybe there's not enough, and their brain is overreacting because it's being understimulated. So there's just a lot of things that go on with the senses and how it affects people in general, but also how it really affects those who have experienced trauma. The physiological strategies or internal needs. So these strategies focus on the internal physical needs. The biology of a child who experienced trauma was significantly altered by their stressful beginnings. Children from hard places are easily dysregulated by dehydration and low blood sugar. So when children are dehydrated or hungry, which means they don't have enough glucose in their blood, their brain function is compromised. Even at the lowest levels, dehydration causes changes in children's thinking, learning, and behavior. So keeping children hydrated is extremely important. Most schools neither encourage or require kids to bring a water bottle every day. My kids' school basically requires them to have their own water bottle every day. So I just want to make sure that if that is not required, that you are providing that with that child every day so that they can have access to water to make sure they are hydrated. Blood glucose. So, especially for children from hard places, minor fluctuations in blood glucose are associated with negative side effects. So, planning and maintaining regular healthy snacks is important. I know sometimes this is a little harder for others, depending on the situation. But a lot of times your blood glucose, which is basically just sugar, sometimes they just need, maybe gum, maybe, a sucker, maybe they just need a little bit of sugar. The gum and stuff really helps that the proprioceptive sense because it gives you that feeling that they need. So a lot of times just because, it's gum or a sucker or something, it's not just giving them what they want or giving them candy to, you know, make them quit fussing about whatever it is or whatever the case may be. A lot of times their body really just needs it. Of course, they don't know it, and that's not an excuse for their behavior, but I just don't want you to always see it as a negative thing. Nutrition, obviously, a balanced diet helps stabilize blood sugar, mood, and learning. We always want to try to have a balanced diet. Maybe the family or the caregiver cannot provide fresh fruits and vegetables daily. So this is just doing do the best you can with what you have or what you have available or what you can access. A lot of schools and churches, do the snack program where they can send home, healthy snacks with kids over the weekends or after school or over the summer. A lot of churches and stuff have food pantries. So really helps some of your families reach out and utilize these resources if they need them. It is extremely important to try to keep the kid as healthy as possible. Allowing and encouraging children to get plenty of physical activity is associated with increased endorphins, decreased depression, anxiety, and stress. So, always want to try to have a kid get a little exercise, do what they can to try to stay, healthy and regulated. I mean, maybe this is something that you guys could do together. Remember, we talked about playful interaction and kind of getting down on their level. So maybe this is something, y'all could do together. Find a little yoga video on YouTube, something that you guys can do together. I know, a lot of schools maybe only have PE once a week or twice a week. So, they're not really getting that at school as much as one might think. So it is also very important to try to keep that in mind along with nutrition. We all know the importance of getting good sleep. I, for one, don't function great when I don't get a lot of sleep, especially if I don't get a lot of sleep or as much sleep as I might need several days in a row. I really do not function well. I might be cranky. I'm tired. I have no energy. I'm not motivated. Kids are the same. Kids are the same way. All us as adults can usually say, I'm just tired. I did not sleep good. Kids usually don't. No, I'm not tired. No, I don't want to take a nap. I'm not sleepy. Can I please just stay up later? I'm fine. They're going to try to avoid sleep if they can. That's a normal kid behavior, but it is very important as the caregiver for you to try to help make sure they get enough good sleep and that you also get enough good sleep. There are several ways to establish a good sleep pattern. Certain kinds of music, maybe you have a routine, whatever the case may be, but not allowing screens an hour before bed is extremely important. There's really been an increase in just screen time in general, that when, a child is on a screen and they're constantly being stimulated by whatever show they're watching or game they're playing, the lights, the colors, the overstimulation, it's going to take them longer to fall asleep because it's going to take their brain longer to calm down. The things y'all can do: read, journal, draw. There's tons of other things to do. Ecological strategies. These are the strategies that focus on the external environment, like transitions. So transitions can be tough, and we know children who've experienced trauma need a little longer to process transitions. By practicing them and creating a routine and giving transition reminders in advance allows the child to feel more in control and gives them time to get ready. There's two different types of transitions. There's the life transitions, which are big things. Maybe they're moving homes. That could just be the family is moving together. It could be they're moving from the family's home to another relative's home. It could be they're moving from the family to a foster home. people they don't know, whatever that moving homes might look like, moving to a new town, having to change schools, any kind of big life transitions. So life transitions prove more difficult and necessitate even more support from those around them. I know that if it is a kid in care and they are going to have to be moved, that a lot of times DFACs or whoever else might be involved do not want to tell the child that they're going to be moved. In some cases, that might be the best route for, maybe they might run or sabotage something or do something aggressive or harmful. So sometimes it might be necessary, but if at all possible, that child needs to be told in advance, not 5 minutes before or just an hour before, so that they can help prepare for what's going to happen. We also have daily transitions, just getting ready for school, leaving for school, getting ready for bed, changing task, maybe at school or at home. Maybe something came up and instead of having the family dinner like you always do on Thursday, something else happened and now we've got to go here to do this. Any sort of transition can be very difficult and it requires preparation, thinking, concentration, and mental flexibility. Many times, at risk children are often able to hold it together while they're at school, but then fall apart emotionally and behaviorally once they get home. And a lot of adults or other people are like, well, they're fine at school. It's just at home. It's just because they think they can get what they want, or they think they can act this way or get away with it here, or whatever the case may be. They're fine at school, they can be fine here. But really, that kid possibly was overloaded and overstimulated all day with thinking and trying to regulate their behavior and the transitions that came with it and trying to just maintain their stability through it all. And so when they come home, it's just basically like a letdown of all their systems. They just kind of shut down, everything falls apart. It's almost where they can finally let their guard down and just let it all out. And just they're kind of saying, I am emotionally and mentally exhausted. And unfortunately, sometimes that comes out in negative behaviors, but really that just might be what it is. Transition solutions. So for life transitions, obviously I mentioned, please try to give these kids heads up if at all possible, if they're going to be moving. For life transitions, they do life or memory books. If the child is going to be adopted, the adoptive case manager will usually do like a life or memory book explaining what happened, give them the history they needed and kind of help them with that. But I also feel like sometimes it might be if they're going back to their biological family, or maybe just doing some other transition other than being adopted, it would be a good time to do a life or memory book then as well. For your daily transitions, there's all kinds of things that people can do. Transition note cards, which kind of lets almost like a schedule, lets people know what's going to happen, let them know what comes next. Frequent reminders, hey, 30 minutes, we've got to leave to go. Hey, 15 minutes, we've got to leave to go. Hey, 5 minutes, we've got to leave to go, and start, getting ready, put your shoes on, but giving them frequent reminders of being, instead of being like, oh gosh, totally lost track of time. It's time to go. It's time to go. And then that kid have a complete meltdown. And you as the adult get all upset and frustrated too, because they're having a meltdown. You're already late. I mean, sometimes it happens, but the point is to try to very hard to have frequent reminders, be prepared, know when the transition is coming, prepare for the transition the best way that you can. So co-regulate. As we've noticed, they haven't learned the ability to regulate on their own. They can't calm themselves by themselves. You need to help them co-regulate, which also means that you have to stay regulated in that moment. Children feel more prepared when caregivers explain an upcoming transition, steps they can take to get ready, what it might be like. And this could be for anything, minor or major ones. Prepare these kiddos for the transitions as much as we can. External needs with scaffolding, self-regulation. I think of scaffolding like steps or scaffolding on a building. The goal is for them to be able to regulate by themselves, but maybe they can't. So maybe they need an external regulator. You as the adult have to do it for them because they can't. And it's kind of co-regulation, helping them do it, giving them the skills to do it, and then them kind of learning to do it on their own. Adults scaffold or appropriately assess and provide the level of help that children need. Learning and implementing skills like self-regulation is smoother, easier, and ultimately just more successful. There are lots of ways to help provide self-regulation. Visually, there are engine plates. regulation posters. Zones of regulation is also very, very good. If you haven't done that training, I think it ties a lot into this training, and you can use a lot of the TBRI principles with the zones of regulation. It teaches about the zones and their emotions, what to do in each one, what you can do to help calm yourself when you're in each one. The interplay kind of does the same thing through sound, calming music, through tactile and proprioceptive senses. This could be fidgets, a sensory bucket, stretching, yoga, wall pushes, weighted blankets. There's things that they can also do when they are, maybe in class or somewhere where maybe getting up and doing stretching or yoga or wall pushes may not be the most appropriate thing to do in that environment. But there's things they could do, chairs, like where you can, push and pull kind of will help with the senses, weighted blankets. Through the nose and mouth, deep breathing, calming smells. I know some classrooms will diffusing like the lavender or calming smells to kind of help calm the classroom. All right, this is an example of an engine plate. You think of red, it's where we're running hot. Probably need a lot of co-regulation. Green, we're kind of in the middle, we're fine. Blue, it's probably where you're a little sad or down, something's going on. Favorite calming activities, this is where you would list what to do, how to kind of get you out of a zone that's probably not where you want to be. If you utilize these, whether you do it as someone who's working with the family and show them how to do it, or the family just does it on their own, that there be one for either all the kids or every member of the family, anybody who's in the house, not just the one kid that might have problems regulating. It'd be great for everybody to have one to kind of lead by example, but two, so that everybody knows that everybody has different emotions, and some emotions we might need a little more help with. Here is the zones of regulation I was talking about. The zones of regulation is a great way to teach kids about regulation, how to regulate their feelings and sensory needs. So as you can see, this poster uses the characters from Inside Out. Side note, if you haven't seen that movie, it is great, very educational for kids to kind of help with their emotions. And I love how the zones of regulation utilize little characters in this poster. It helps to explain the different emotional zones. There's also another one similar to this included at the end that kind of gives options of what to do at each zone. This one, the lines at the bottom, is what you were supposed to come up with to help that person when they're in each zone, or work with that person together to help come up with it. External needs, daily rituals. It is helpful to understand the difference between routines and rituals. Routines are practices set in place so that families and children can be prepared and know what to expect. Morning routine, weekday routine, nighttime routine, eat breakfast, brush our teeth, brush our hair, get dressed, whatever the routine might be. What you need to do, in what order, and what to expect. Rituals, though, have a completely different function and entirely. Daily rituals allow people to strengthen their relationships with one another through small daily practices. So you want to think between an adult, a caregiver, and the child. This could be something they do that is special just between them two. So it could be making them, they have their own special song, they have their own special handshake, they have a special daily greeting. They have their own special thing they do at night for part of their bedtime thing. If they have their own little special saying that they say or whatever, it's just something that is just between that adult and that child that is unique to them, that helps them develop and feel connected to that adult. Correcting principles. Correcting is our last principle. It helps to build social and behavioral competence. So here, proactive strategies teach social skills during calm times, and the responsive strategies teach tools to respond during challenging behaviors. Of your proactive strategies, calm times, when we're playing with our kids and teens, having fun, we're going to use like playful interaction to teach them skills that they might be struggling with or they need to learn. The responsive strategies are more in the moment of a challenging behavior. But the correcting principles are designed to balance between connecting and correcting. It's the same as between nurture and structure. You really can't have one without the other. or if you do, the balance is way off. They might be behaving and correcting and compliant all the time, but they have no connection with anyone. So you really need to kind of have that balance for it to really work. Active strategies, which is like we said, teaching while calm. This is what you do while you're hanging out, having fun, whatever the case may be. One of the proactive strategies is the life value terms. Ask children to use respectful words and actions. And in turn, the adult or caregiver also models this for them. Maybe the kid just playing and says something a little disrespectful and be like, hey, were you using respect? Hey, do you feel like that was kind of respectful? Hey, don't forget, we try to use respectful words in this house, or whatever the case may be. It's not getting them in trouble or making them feel bad. Teach children to use their words, not their behaviors, to get their needs met. So instead of going, maybe the snack cabinet or the refrigerator and pointing at it and saying, not using your words, or just saying snack, snack, you want to teach them saying, can I have a snack, please? Just helping them learn that they do have a voice. And when they use their voice, someone will listen and can meet their needs. Gentle and kind, coach children to be gentle and kind to other people and animals. Hey, don't forget to be gentle and kind. Don't forget to make sure we use nice hands with the animals, whatever the case may be. Listen and obey is the boss, with permission and supervision. This is a good one for kind of your older kids. So a lot of times your older kids, maybe they get mad and they want to just storm off and walk away, walk around the block, because the caregiver can't do that for, various reasons. So be like, okay, sure. Hey, go ahead. I know you need to take a walk and calm down. I'm going to stay a couple of steps behind you, give you your time and space, but I also need to ensure that you stay safe. But, you can have your time and space as you need. If you want to talk, that's fine. I'm here. If not, I totally understand that too. There's lots of different things. Are you asking or telling? Like I said, you just want to do it while you're playing. Do maybe the puppet game, or hey, let's role play. I'm going to be you be the mom, whatever the case may be. So that's something to do really good when play and kind of teach them these things. Behavioral scripts are another proactive strategy. We have redos. Redos, it's a do-over to replace a negative behavior with a positive behavior. Let's say you told them to go put their shoes up and they threw them across the room. You'd say, how about let's redo that. Let's try that again. Behavior is not okay, but it's also really something that you don't need to be too reactive and too judgmental over. It's like, hey, let's just redo that. Redos are one of the most important correcting strategies because it teaches 3 truths. 1, we all make mistakes, and it gives us a way to repair the mistake. The child has the opportunity to practice appropriate behavior, and the child can learn more from repairing the mistake than if they never made the mistake in the first place. Also, this is something that adults can do. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me redo that. Let me say that differently because it came out wrong, or it didn't mean what I wanted it to mean. It's also very important as an adult to do this as well. Choices. This offers children an appropriate amount of control with 2 acceptable options. So many behaviors are attempts to gain control or felt safety, and this allows the child to have some control. Adults sometimes have a hard time with this because you feel like you are letting the child have all the power, or the child make the decisions, or the child be in charge. And that's not it at all. Choices is where you or the child can give this child 2 options and they can have the choice. So let's say, hey, go ahead and clean your room. No, I'm not cleaning my room. Okay, well, you have the choice. You can clean your room now, or you can clean your room after dinner. Either way, the room gets clean. Either way. So it's not giving them control. The goal is still met. It's just letting them decide when it's going to get met. It's letting them have some sort of control. Remember, they had no control whatsoever. So they are constantly fighting for it, or they constantly don't want to give any of it up because they feel like if they give anybody else control, they're just going to let them down. So it's very important to let kids feel like that they do have a little bit of control over their lives. Compromises. So this allows the children to offer a different choice. So let's say if the choices are not going to work, you want to encourage the child to ask for a compromise. Maybe they don't want to clean the room right now. They don't want to clean the room after dinner. But like, hey, how about, will you help me clean my room before we go to bed? Or will you help me clean my room after dinner? Sure, I can do that. Or, hey, how about I clean half of my room now and half of it before I go to bed, or half of it after dinner? Okay, fine, sure. It's great compromise. Great compromise. Good job. Again, the goal is still being met. You don't have to get in this tug of war, this fight over control over something so little as maybe cleaning their room or putting their shoes up or whatever, whatever it is. It doesn't always have to be, this control thing, and you as the adult think that you always have to be in control or you always have to be the one in charge. This isn't really giving them the ability to be in charge. It's just kind of giving them a little control over when they do what they have to do. Responsive strategy. While proactive strategies teach social skills during calm times, your responsive strategies teach tools to respond during the challenging behaviors. So Tbri has this ideal response. So, you're looking at an immediate response, which means it's within a few seconds of the behavior. The adult or caregiver must be present and mindful. You cannot be on your phone. You can't be distracted. You can't not know what's going on and then kind of jump to a response or a consequence when you didn't know what was going on. You weren't paying attention. You weren't there. Whatever the case may be, you need to be present, and it needs to be immediate. You don't need to say, okay, we'll take care of this when we get home in 5 hours. That one, the kids either probably forgot about it by then, and now you're just bringing it right back up and making them feel bad all over again. Or that is all that child is going to think about for 5 hours, how bad they are, how horrible they are, how they can't do anything right. And that's, neither one of those are appropriate options. So it needs to be immediate. Direct, you need to be fully engaged with the child. This also goes along with, you don't need to be distracted or doing something else. You need to be fully engaged with that child when you're being responsive. Efficient, that means to use the minimum intervention necessary. Again, this means, you don't want to be overreactive. Let's just, whatever it is whatever we need to address it with. We don't need to be overreactive. Action-based, so the child should be an active participant in their own learning. So kind of, they need to know what's going on. They need to know what happened. What was it that they did that they shouldn't have done? How could they have done it correctly? Leveled at the behavior, this is focused on the behavior, not the child. Focus on the behavior, not the child. So if a youth or a kid is chronically, like I said, chronically late getting ready in the morning, what can we do to change this? Not what's wrong with you. Not what is wrong with you as a person, as an individual. It is more of, let's focus on this behavior, what's not working, and what can we do to change it. Tbri website has this little poster, so I just like to reiterate it. Immediate, within a couple of seconds if possible. Engage directly with eye contact, touch, proximity. Efficient, use a measured response and that's equal to the challenging behavior. Action-based, that's another great way. Give the opportunity for a redo, practicing the right way. Leveled at the behavior, not the child. Remember, you're wanting to help this child overcome the behavior and whatever was driving the behavior. We also have levels of response. So first up, we have playful engagement. This promotes connections and disarms fear because play disarms fear. So this will look different depending on the age and situation, but this can be anything from just a smile or, playing basketball, doing whatever, to just being completely silly, acting like zoo animals, playing, having a tea party, whatever the case may be. And that's where you're kind of teaching some of those behavior scripts and practicing some situations in play. Next, you have the structured engagement. Now, this is where what you use when there is a bit of a challenge, but the child can still self-regulate. So this is where the adult or caregiver is a little more authoritative and firm and in their responses to the child. Behavior scripts are most useful here. So this is where if the child is having some sort of a challenge or is having a challenging behavior, this is where you'd be like, ooh, are you asking or telling? Let's redo that. Let's see if we can try that again. So you want to be a little more authoritative, but not, so much to scare the child or to escalate the situation even more. The goal is to de-escalate the situation. Next up, we have the calming engagement. So this is where there is some sort of this is to prevent potentially dangerous situations. So this is where the child is not quite in the red zone, but is pretty close, and you're trying to prevent that child from getting into the red zone. So the child is probably on a verge of a meltdown. You can see it coming usually because you know the child. So a common strategy in TBRI is time in as opposed to time out. Time in is where the child is kept close to the adult or caregiver, either next to, right next to them, or as close as possible, or as close to that child's comfort level. And you want to have them close to that adult or caregiver so the child still feels connected. They don't feel isolated. They are connected. They have a person, a safe person. They feel safe. And they know that that person can help them calm down, may need some co-regulation, but that adult or caregiver can help them calm down. And this is obviously opposed to timeout, where a child is sent away from the caregiver or adult and is isolated, whether, be in their room or at the corner, whatever designated area some people use for a timeout. But that leaves the child to feel not safe and build a lot of fear. The child is probably, worried about what's going to happen the next time they see that adult, whether the adult walks in the room or they walk out of the room. How is that adult going to respond? That just tends to build a lot of fear, and that's not helping calm the child down. That's really just making things escalate. Next up, and lastly, we have protective engagement. And this is where the situation is dangerous. Crisis intervention might be needed. This is where the child is either a threat to themselves or others, or has threatened to hurt themselves or others, and you know that the threat is serious. This is not taught as part of TBRI because most organizations have their own policies and procedures that has to be followed. So for us at Family Mentors, this is when we utilize our crisis plans with the client or call 911. So the main goal here is to keep everyone safe, including the child and anyone around the child. So we have one last video that kind of ties in together the ideal response and the levels of response.
When a child from a hard place doesn't feel safe, the result is often behaviors that appear willful, baffling, and infuriating to caregivers. How we respond in these moments is critical, and TBRI has developed a guideline to help. The ideal response looks at the levels of behavior with the goal of moving the child to a calmer state. Immediate means dealing with misbehavior within 3 seconds. Meltdowns are a runaway train. A gentle word, and often just the question, "I see you're upset, what do you need?" is enough to put on the brakes. Hunger, dehydration, and a need for sleep are often triggers. Direct isn't glancing up from your phone and yelling across the room. It's responding with direct eye contact, proximity, and reassuring touch when possible. Efficient stresses levels of a response using a kind voice and the fewest words. Caregivers should ask, "What is this behavior saying? What does this child need? And how can I teach them to get these needs met?" Action-based can offer a child a do-over. Instead of punishment, a calming, smiling voice saying, "Let's try that again," followed by praise, can create an instructional path and a positive body memory. Leveled at behavior addresses the behavior, not the child, allowing the caregiver to be an advocate, not an adversary. When you're reactive instead of proactive, you put your energy in the wrong place and miss the opportunity for a teaching moment. Playful engagement works best when the behavior is at a low level. A redo can diffuse the situation quickly. A cheerful, "Can you try that again with respect?" can turn the tide when followed by praise. Structured engagement is needed when the situation has escalated and playful engagement has failed. If a meltdown ensues by offering the child a choice, they learn they have a voice. "Can I have a compromise?" said in a firm, calm voice followed by, "Good compromise," can introduce recognizable scripts a child can understand. When aggressive behavior looms, nothing is gained by responding in anger or isolation. Calming engagement says, "Here, come sit beside me. You seem to be having a hard time. You let me know when you're ready to talk." Remaining calm and keeping the child close changes the dynamic. When there's a potential for violence, protective engagement means first removing the child or others from the situation and letting them know that they're safe and not defined by their behavior. Helping the child to breathe and asking what they need can help restore calm. The foundation of TBRI is that behaviors are driven by fear and unmet needs, and when we avoid angry, punitive behavior ourselves, we open the door to better outcomes for our children.
I hope you found that video very useful, just like the way it ties everything together. Lastly, part of the presentation is just the resources. The TCU website has a lot of resources. Obviously, that's where TBRI was developed, so they have a lot of resources. YouTube, as you noticed, that's where all of my videos came from. They also have several more videos. There are tons of books that you can see listed here, and I'm sure as well as others, podcast and parent coaching. There are also going to be some additional trainings, and if you guys want additional trainings in any of these areas, you can always reach out to me and I can see when there will be one that is the closest to you or one that maybe you could do virtually. And lastly, of course, you can always reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want any more information or resources or anything that you might be able to use with the kids or utilize. So you can always reach out to me. If I don't have it, I can definitely try to find it for you. Just a few more little things that I threw in here that I like from the resources. This one is, "Why does my child's behavior trigger me?" Just like that because it's really informative for the parents or caregivers. This brain is just a different one that kind of shows upstairs and downstairs brains. Little routine chart. Of course, there's several more that you can find online or Pinterest or anywhere. And this little zones of regulation poster, this is another additional one. I like this one because it already has some options of what the child can do to get out of each zone. So a lot of times when you're having a child do this, they may have difficulty coming up with things that they can do or what they think will help them. Maybe they don't know. So this can go ahead and give them a couple of options to start. And then of course, as you can see at the end of each one, it says they can also add anything else additionally that they think might help later on. All right, thank you so much. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this and can really utilize this information.